high priest of Akhenaten. So, bringing up Akhenaten, I had this link on there, and by the way, I had visited this museum, which is at the University of Pennsylvania. It's right across, the museum is right across from Franklin Field, which was where the Eagles used to play. Now, I don't know, except the University of Pennsylvania plays there, I guess, because they've got other stadiums in Philly. But this one, this museum has lots of Egyptian mummies and so on. And as you can see here, this is a stela of Akhenaten. If you saw the opera piece that I had, the special effects are, all these hands coming down from the sun. So the Met used actual Egyptian images in the opera. But this is Akhenaten. I'm not sure who this is here. When I made these, I just quickly ran through the whole museum and took all these pictures, so I'm assuming you could always hit pause if you wanted to look longer at the different pieces as I went. I think there's I'll probably every once in a while say something, but those are all on my YouTube website. There's another one. You can see that was pretty much all over the place. The thing about Akhenaten was that he, as pharaoh, his original name I think was Akhenamen, but he was obligated as pharaoh to travel all year long from one temple to another, and kind of arrange for them to be there exactly when the sun reaches a particular point where it shines through the aperture of the temple, so that he was there at the right time of year for the right ceremony, etc. And he eventually, for whatever reason, got tired of it, or he concluded that it was all false, that there was only one God, and so he created a new temple dedicated just to Aten, the sun, so he became a monotheist, arguably a monotheist, and he shut down all the other temples, which was an absolute disaster for the economy of Egypt and for all those that were, economically based on all of those temples. So while it lasted for maybe about 15 years or so, eventually those other priests either overthrew him or he died, and and so Tutankhamun was a young kid. Basically, it became and Nefertiti was his wife. Maybe not the mother of Tutankhamun, maybe she was, who knows. But in any case, she was like the queen, pharaoh for a while, but eventually King Tut becomes the king, and the priesthood class reasserts itself. And the monotheists fled. So there are arguments. Freud gives this, but you also see it in a more contemporary book. There's another one, Moses the Egyptian. So Moses the Egyptian, there's lots, you could read lots of stuff about that. Basically arguing that Moses was maybe even the high priest of Akhenaten, and when Akhenaten died and the monotheists were chased out, he led the followers away, and perhaps that coincides historically with the Hebrews fleeing Egypt and going north. But in any case, so you end up with a more monotheistic type belief system north, right? And so you end up with Israel, and there's still other gods, of course, all over. There's interesting traditions associated then with the Hebrew Bible. Theoretically, Moses was the author of the first 5 books of the Bible, but many people point out since that, while that was the tradition, that there was no way one individual could have written all those. Instead, there's all kinds of interesting questions about who wrote the Bible. It's Richardson. Elliot Friedman actually is the one who has one of the best books out on it, perhaps. I don't know, wherever you want to look it up. It's pretty old already. But he basically argues that what you end up with is two different traditions that merged, so that you get the North Kingdom and the Southern Kingdom. They had different temples, but the two of them ended up being merged in the Bible. The one treated God as Yahweh, and the other treated God as Allah, or the Elohim in plural. So you can see the connection with the vocabulary. By the way, all the people in this area were Semitic, and so when we talk about anti-Semitism today, that seems the word has clearly changed dynamically, because a lot of people think that the Palestinians, for example, are anti-Semites because they're against the Jewish people. Well, but they're both Semites, so it just doesn't make sense. So the way a lot of people talk about it, my personal thinking is that the Jewish people, because of the diaspora after they were chased out of their homeland by the Romans, because of the two different revolts 60 years apart that they had, the Romans crushed them and they basically had to flee. And so the Jewish people were all over the place. And so the Europeans got used to having Jewish people around, and eventually over various pogroms and periods, they really got kind of a routine of hating the Jewish people, but depending on them. So it was one of those things, and as a result, there's this association with anti-Semitism in Europe, and it didn't include the Arabs because the Arabs weren't there, but now, of course, the Arabs are moving there because of the temperature changes, as well as other reasons, and as a result, you end up with other Semites there. So I don't know. It's very confusing. But so the Bible, in the beginning at least, is considered to have written in different periods. The primarily elite returning from the captivity in Babylonia were supposed to be the first that started writing the stories. And notice that the stories like Adam, Noah, there's lots of stories that are actually even older than, of course, the scripture. So they're kind of a telling of these stories, and you could find the stories in the cuneiform writings. We now, because of archaeologists finding lots of cuneiform tablets all over that were much older, the cuneiform writing, you can literally read it just like, reading English if you get the training and you learn how it works. And in fact, the neat guy that teaches it, that's on YouTube the most, is this guy, Irving Finkel.
Hey everyone, so the team decided to do a fun competition. If you're able to make a donation,
I don't know how to write phonetically. Use the flow.
Sorry about that. I didn't know he was going to do that, but that's.
Well,
he's pretty neat. I love his beard. But he's neat. But so the different groups that write the Bible include the Northern Kingdom, the Southern Kingdom, and then the priesthood redaction. So the priesthood put it together, and then there's another group. So they've got these different levels of who wrote what when, and put them together. And then the other books, of course, come from even other sources. So there's a very interesting analysis of where all of these different writings come from. And is monotheism a continuing issue there? Another book by the same author. I lost it, didn't I? Let me get back to this one, and I can go Richard Friedman here. Let's just do it this way. And it's the hidden face of God. So this is same author, but this one talks about how originally God has a location. Gods in general, you have people that make statues of them, and so you have all kinds of images of them. Remember, though, that one of the 10 Commandments is don't have idols, don't have graven images. And why is that? By then, the view was that God was, you couldn't create an image of God. God was invisible. He sat on, a movable place, because they had the ark where they could move God, they could carry God with them. But there was no image of God in the ark, right? So it's a gradually more and more abstract conception of God as a result of that. So it becomes a hidden face. The last person to have actually seen the face of God, according to this series or stories, is Moses up on Sinai, and the experience of that basically burns his face, etc. So there's kinds of interesting aspects to that. But even then, that God was considered to be he had other competitive gods, right? So the goal of being, staying with your God is that, don't follow the other gods. Don't build idols, out of gold. The golden calf, and all that stuff, an ongoing thing. So, Jesus, when we think about Jesus, the Jewish people believed that there would be a Messiah that would reestablish a political kingdom and give them their freedom from those that occupied them. Some of the initial occupiers, obviously, the Babylonian captivity, they were finally released by, I think it was Nebuchadnezzar, who released them, and so on. But then they're also occupied by the Greeks, thanks to Alexander the Great conquering the world. The area where they lived was occupied by the Greeks. Kind of interesting, though, they were in the middle of a border between the Ptolemy, because when Alexander died, his kingdom, his empire, was split up by his 3 generals. Ptolemy got Egypt. Help me with the other 2. I can't remember who were the 3. Split Alexander's. Ptolemy, Seleucus, the Seleucids, they were the ones in the north. The north. It tells you who here, and Antigonus. Got Greece and so on. But so they ended up with a dispute over where the border was between the Seleucus and Ptolemy, and so they had a fight in the middle, and in that the Maccabees, the Jewish